about some really interesting, a bit of history about the SATs, some information about what changes have been happening. So I'm just going to hand that over to him to get us started. This is just a brief agenda. I'll give us this brief overview of what's happening in today's presentation. So Jeremy's going to give a brief intro to test takers and talk about the SAT changes. I'll be talking about admission trends, what's been happening. As a college counselor, I've seen all these patterns of students that have applied and been following the news carefully with the UK, Australia, America, and Canada. I'm going to hand it back over to Jeremy to talk about some updates and test optional. And also Jeremy can run us through, and we could jump in on each other's, add thoughts to whatever we're talking about, but we'll sort of host that. And at the end, we'll look at the chat bar to take any questions that you have as parents. So I'm going to hand over this first section to Jeremy to talk about, to give us a brief introduction to test takers and the SATs.
Okay, well, James, thank you very much for the kind introduction. And again, my name is Jeremy Craig. I've been doing SAT prep since I was a young undergraduate at Columbia University in the early 90s. And I moved to Singapore some 20 odd years ago doing something completely different. And I realized that SAT prep was a good way to make some good money and something I enjoy doing. Now, the last 15 months or so, it's, I'm not even going to try to avoid using the word unprecedented, but things are all in flux right now. And rather than plan ahead too far, particularly for those of you with 12th graders, you basically have about a year to kind of figure out what's going on. There's a Chinese aphorism, which means to go across the river by feeling for stones, meaning you take one step at a time. You don't want to plan too far ahead. Basically, what's happened with COVID, the SAT is broadly not available in large swaths of America. Now, if the SAT was not available in Southeast Asia, it wouldn't change things. But because the SAT is not available in certain parts of California, New York, Oregon, Washington State, et cetera, the universities have realized that they can't require something that people can't easily take. So all universities, with a couple exceptions in America, have effectively gone test optional. And we'll talk about what that means later on, which effectively means if you can't take it or don't get a good result, then you shouldn't worry about it. But if you can take it and get a good result, you might as well do it because it'll help your chances a little bit. And we'll get into the minutia of that moving forward from there. So, but that said, universities are just about now finishing their year 13 for your years. And they're just starting to kind of look towards building their class to start in August, and what exactly they're going to be requiring for the year that will be starting in August of 2022 is a little bit up in the air right now. So anything you see on university websites is going to be outdated, particularly given events of the last couple of weeks that we'll talk about later. And basically just hang in there, have your kid work hard in school, and try not to worry too much about it. Universities need students, and they're not going to make it harder for you to get in. If you email universities now demanding what they're going to require for a class of 2022, they frankly don't know the answer themselves. So just kind of hold off, and things should hopefully coalesce and gel together by the summer months, June, July. We'll have a better idea about what's going on with all sorts of factors going, all different things at play right now. And then and only then will we really know what all is going to be required. But just rest assured that IB results are the most important thing. And that's what your kids should really be focused on now, given everything else that's going on in the world. Yeah, that's my broad intro, James. Anything to add to that?
1 sec here. I'm just going to get our screen. Give me a sec here. I'm going to get my camera going. Can you see my camera here, Jeremy? Can you see me?
No, I can see the screen, but I can't see you.
Okay, let me try to get stop video and, okay, 1 sec. Start video. Okay, here we go. Can everybody, that's great. And I will get everybody, great. Okay, perfect. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, just in regards to the class of 22, you parents are in preparation for that. So the thing to just be mindful of is, as Jeremy said, things are in flux right now in terms of universities. This was a challenging year, I think, for applicants, particularly with the class of 2021. I'm going to talk about this later as well and go through each of the country systems. But I just want to, just to get the most up-to-date information, I would wait to closer. We're going to be giving a presentation to year 12 parents next week, beginning on February 10th, on how to do research for universities. So a lot of the information won't be available. The most up-to-date information won't be available until closer to April or May as they admit their classes for the year and get all that situated. So
Yeah, I think one thing to add as well, across all the major university destinations, there's going to be a bit of a reckoning with universities consolidating, dropping programs, potentially closing. So you want to do your research now, but just have in the back of your head that you might have to do it all over again in a couple months. So keep those websites bookmarked.
Okay, so yeah, I'll take it from here in terms of admissions updates and what we've been seeing from the College Counseling Office and student applications this year. So the general trend here, as you can see, specifically for the UK and Europe, it's been an on again, off again kind of experience, opening and closing. I've spoken to several of our alumni who are in the UK and Europe this year, and one of the things that they have found is that they really have benefited from. The UK has tried to offer at least 1 or 2 live classes per week. So there's certain restrictions on how many students can attend classes. So students have been able to attend smaller tutorial classes, and they found that's kept them motivated. However, some of the universities, as you know, like Cambridge, has been completely online this year. So there hasn't been that opportunity to engage in any of the tutorial sessions. So this is sort of a situation as well in the UK with the increase of COVID and cases, and it's kind of a shifting pattern. It's opening and closing, and it's indeterminate at this point. Another thing that's made some changes too has been deferments. So a particular example of deferments is with Cambridge University. You can see that second point here on over admitting students. So what happened last year, as you're aware, parents, with the IB scores and results, is that many of the results were taken from internal assessments that students had done, along with an anticipated final score based on individual schools' predicted results. So some schools, our results were very strong overall at NIST. So students actually, we were pretty fortunate in that our students, their final DP results were very, very strong. So one of the things that this wasn't just true with our school, but with many other schools around the world, many students Cambridge had anticipated with A levels and IB results to all results are dependent in the UK on final results. So what they had anticipated is that the final results would be lower than they had anticipated. So unfortunately, they had to accept more students than they wanted to, and many asked for deferments. And as a result of that, Cambridge University in particular has a limited amount of accommodation. So what happened is that due to deferments and due to the number of students who were deciding to do Cambridge online, this year was a very difficult year for students to be admitted to that institution in particular. So that's just one example of how, and this is not only true of Cambridge University, but a notable example, and I'm sure Jeremy can attest to this, is Princeton University, which Princeton has, Princeton, New Jersey is a very small town. They only have a certain number of students have to live in residence. And one of the facts is that, if students are asking for deferments, they have to allocate those slots to students, not only for 2021, but for 2020, but for 2021 as well. So they have to honor that students wanted to take a gap year in light of the situation. So that's what made 2021 very difficult for students going into the highly selective schools. Yeah, Jeremy, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I've heard anecdotally that the very similar the case, not just Princeton, but also Harvard, Stanford, all the usual suspects, where a lot of kids wisely, I think, deferred when they still could, and then of course they take seats for the next round forward. It's like a rock concert only has 1,000 seats. They oversell, those seats go into the next cycle, and this is going to be like a recurring sine wave for 2 or 3 cycles from now. As time continues, I think as a result, sadly, it's probably going to be a little bit harder to get into those most competitive schools, both in UK, Australia, America, as a result of all this.
Yeah, agreed here, and it's a knock-on effect, and particularly one of the things I'll talk about this in our US section of this, but another knock-on effect is the SATs being either test blind or test optional, where you've got a swath of more applicants applying to these prestigious schools who don't have SAT results. And that's another factor that led to it being, that this 2021 has been, I would argue, the most competitive year of college applications ever. Moving forward to the Netherlands is becoming a hot place for NIST students in particular to study. And the reason being that is due to with the UK sort of changing its rules on Brexit. This year, they haven't many changes to EU. As you know, EU passport holders are entitled to UK home status fees. But due to Brexit, this is a big unknown. So what many students have decided this year is what we've seen at NIST is there's been just a massive shift in the number of students who've applied to Netherlands. And they've applied to the UK as well, but they're really looking at fees overall. And the Netherlands is a great option for many students at NIST. It's a 3-year university degree. It's all taught in English. They've got excellent specialized programs. They also have the ability to work when you're there. So it's been one of those university systems that's been on the rise for a few years and has been on the radar for international parents as well. The fees are also very, very, for international students, it's the best deal going. I think it's for most programs, it's under 10,000 euros a year for international students. And if you've got a European passport, it's under 2,000 euros a year. And so, for financial aid, if that's what families are, if that's a strong consideration, it would be part of the research process that we're going to start with you and your sons and daughters next week is this research process. So part of that is going to be looking at costs. And you'll notice that the Netherlands comes up at best value for money degrees on the planet. So other things that, and as I said here, the last point, there's been an increase to EU schools. It's mostly been the Netherlands. However, we have seen at NIST applications increasing to other countries. Germany also has many English language programs. Belgium is another one that's sort of on the rise in terms of EU applications for NIST students. So just one of the things for you as parents to do is continue to ask us questions as college counselors and get the information, connecting with alumni who are there, finding out what their experiences are is critical in making decisions on these university systems. Let's move over to Australia. And okay, so next Tuesday, as I mentioned, we have it's the University of Melbourne who's going to be hosting a session with us Tuesday morning. Australia's been, I would argue, because they're so dependent on international students, the University of New South Wales, more than 50% of the students there are international students. They really weren't able to, the timing was absolutely the worst in terms of Australian University. As you know, they started in February. That's when, the outbreak of COVID became international, and students really were unable to begin their studies in Australia. So Australia is heavily reliant on these fees. And even now, you're saying, Jeremy, we talked about this yesterday, that they're still not able to enter. They had these schemes to bring these, international students from China on smaller planes and everything like that, but they've been unable.
They tried a trial run of one plane load to Adelaide, but I think what's happening now is Australians, expat Australians around the world, are keen to get home to Australia, yet they have to throttle a number coming in to make sure there's protocols coming in. So Australians can't make it back home, and they're obviously taking precedent over foreign students who are maybe starting. So it's sort of, Australia's a big island, which is lucky in this case, but it's going to be very tricky to see how they open up again, travel-wise for students.
Yeah, no, it's just once, they as you know, Australia has very strict, guidelines on how many people can enter, and so it's been a challenging year for them, to say the least. They started many, it was a great year after year. The Australian international students were attending Australia. So they started all these mega projects, these new arts and science buildings and everything like that have had to be put temporarily on hold. One thing that Australian universities, we'll talk about this in our presentation on Tuesday, one thing that many of the universities have been trying to do to bring back the trust of international students and families is many of their entry requirements have been eased for international students. So for example, for a Bachelor of Arts degree in the University of Melbourne, the requirement used to be 38 IB points. That's now down to 32. So those kind of, that's a huge, in terms of the type of student who's going into the arts program, that's going to, make a significant impact on, who gets in, and in terms of scholarship opportunities as well. I really like that last point as well, variable course fees. So one thing that's noteworthy about Australia is that they really have targeted certain majors as being majors of the future, or majors where there'll be more careers and jobs. So the government puts more subsidies into engineering and computer science than they would into the liberal arts. So it's a bit of an experiment on really they've really been looking at demographics and job shifts, and trying to train its workforce for jobs of the future. We talked about this yesterday. Any other comments on that, Jeremy?
It's a grand experiment that if you're studying mechanical engineering, you pay like 1/5 of what you would pay to study, Roman history or classics or my field, Chinese history. It's almost like a polytechnic approach, though, of saying we need to get these type of graduates for these type of jobs. And of course, the old mantra is we don't know what jobs will be like in 10 years. And therefore, an old liberal arts guy like me says you should learn how to learn in university, and then worry about that as the time will come. But it's an experiment. It's the first country on a large scale that's tried this, and a lot of people will be watching very closely. Now, this was announced right when COVID was happening, so I haven't read much recently about how they're juggling the two. But it's certainly something to keep an eye on later on. And when we're looking at universities in Australia, we look at the costs, just see whether or not they have different costs for different faculties. Because I'm not sure whether or not they've even released a statement for that. Just be aware that the cost structure might completely change in a year or two.
Yeah, and these subsidies might be for domestic students only. So that's something.
Yeah. I haven't really seen all the details yet, but it's an interesting idea. It's an experiment.
Yeah, and Year 12 parents, as we work with your sons and daughters this year, one of the things you're going to be doing is the students are going to be the ones who are going to be researching this. How much does it cost to do a liberal arts degree versus an engineering? What are the subsidies like? Do they play into effect with international students? So it's part of our collective journey to do the research and find out if it's if that sort of mold fits us, or that particular country system is right. Lastly, America and Canada, we kind of lump those two together. I mean, they are very disparate systems, but as you can see here, there has been a significant drop in foreign students in the U.S. So some of the factors that are coming to play is the tremendous cost of going to the U.S. for university. You're looking at $50,000 to $60,000 for tuition, U.S. dollars for tuition, and then students have been thinking value for money, and families have been thinking about this as well. Is it worth it to do an online degree from UC San Diego for that amount of money, when my son or daughter could take a year off, or not to take a year off, but maybe do something a bit more like get involved with working with an NGO or doing some job shadowing here in Thailand. So there's been a lot of, in terms of international students and families thinking about, is the US the right fit this year, and sort of that wait and see approach. And the same token, we've seen in the US a massive rise in applications of domestic applicants to the most prestigious universities. So Tufts, I was just reading this morning that Tufts University, very, very, very top tier institution in the US, 50% of the applicants this year were US, which is very high for them. And they've seen an increase of applications in 30% overall. And I think one of the reasons being is due to that all the US universities have made the SATs test optional. So everybody feels like they got a shot at the big schools, when formerly they felt like, well, I want to go to Stanford, but my SATs are 900 or something like that, but I've got a great story. So I think you can just, I don't know if you want to comment on this.
Yeah, I think for a school like Tufts, a great example. Normally if you're scoring a 1250, good at school, blah, blah, your guidance counselor could say, listen, Sally, you're a great student, but maybe Tufts is a little bit of a bridge too far. Let's have a look at these other schools besides. And if you're in Boston, there's about 19 other universities you can look at that are great. But now you'd have a look and say, well, my SATs aren't quite there. So, but they don't look at SATs anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply anyway. What I'm going to be interested to see is how many people are getting into schools like Tufts who did not submit SAT scores versus people who got in and submitted SAT scores. Everything I've heard thus far is anecdotal. I've had a few students in Singapore get into really good schools and they didn't submit their SAT score. But those are individual points. Whereas previously, university advisors just kind of fall back on the SAT and say, listen, you're here, their median scores are there, probably not going to happen. Now they don't have that. And mom might just say, okay, well, it's only another $80 to apply. And if you contact the university, universities are never going to tell you not to apply to their school because they want the applicants and they're, it helps their numbers. So I like to see some more analysis on, people who are getting into great schools like Tufts, how many are submitting, how many are not submitting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And that will certainly inform how they move forward into 2023. Because I think the optional policy can't but not continue into 2022. And then universities are going to have to say, well, let's have a look and see where we're at.
Yeah, the SAT's always been the predicator. You would be hard pressed to find a student who's attending Harvard or Stanford. There's just, a handful of students who don't have, a top SAT score. It's that idea of the SAT score. Jeremy's going to talk about this and the history of the SATs. The score was a way for them to, to select their classes. I mean, it's one of the premier, academic requirements really for these schools. So, we've had schools like U Chicago, right? Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Well,
sorry.
You just add one thing. There's this belief that the SAT is different from school. And having worked with thousands of students over the years, small fraction of which we're lucky enough to get in these top, Stanford and your Ivies, those students can fall out of bed on a Tuesday and kill the SAT because they're really, 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 really smart. And if you're really, really smart and good at school and read books and in advanced math class, you're going to do great on the SAT because that's what it tests. It's not novel knowledge. It's not all of a sudden that they're testing your yoga skills or Greek knowledge. It's test of what you learned in school already. And there's this myth that, oh, Sally just isn't a good tester, but she's very good academically. Well, if you're good academically, you're probably going to do really well on the SAT because that's what it tests and what it predicts to inform universities of.
Yeah, and then again, there are, certain circumstances. We know in the U.S., it's the obstacles and barriers for taking the SATs have been, insurmountable in many cases where there's been a swath of
exactly. And of course, now you're in a world where if you live in Upper West Side of Manhattan, you can't take the SAT. And that's why they're optional. And I think the universities kind of like it. They can't say that, but they do. And then that brings this a bigger philosophical debate that James I've had many times about how can a kid from a disadvantaged suburb in LA be compared with a kid in Beverly Hills? Well, universities know that, and they're going to know that a 1300 in Inglewood is different from the 1300 in Mendocino. And they're just going to factor that in without telling people they're factoring it in. So, but again, now it's a question of test access, and universities need students, and you can't ask for things that kids can't take. And even in Singapore, if you don't go to a couple international schools that are closed test centers, you can't take the SAT in Singapore. Forget it. It's just not available.
We're fortunate here. We do at NIST, we have spots that are reserved specifically for NIST students. So if parents, you have any questions about registering, do so. That the deadline for registration is coming up soon for the March SATs. The deadline is February 14th to register, but I would do so as early as possible. Although we do slate certain seats for NIST students, you can email me if you're having any issues in that regard. So I'm happy to help you. But we're in a very privileged situation here in Thailand compared to the rest of the world in terms of taking the test. Just some other things. So just to recap what we see here in the slide, as we said, the SAT, it's just for this year, right? The SAT has been, but we do anticipate that it's going to be test optional for a couple of years. But the fact that we have it here at NIST, and if you are applying to U.S. universities and you are applying to the most competitive schools, I would advise, as your college counselor, to show them that you took the opportunity that was provided for you, and that you did well on it, to show that it matches sort of where your IB scores are at. So that would be my advice if you're applying to any of the Ivy League schools. The last point, as we said, the competitive schools have gotten more competitive. When we look at students applying, the same students apply to the same 10 schools. Everybody applies to UCLA, UC San Diego, and UC Berkeley. I mean, this year, just speaking to college representatives from the UCs, their applications have gone. Last year, UCLA had 200,000 applications for, I believe it was 10,000 spots. This year, it's gone up to over 300,000. It's absolutely, it's out of control.
And they can't use the SAT at all, and they're having to sift through those.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's just they've had to, yeah, and they what universities have done in the U.S. is they've extended deadlines for submitting because they simply can't keep up with the volume of applications that they're encountering. They need to hire external readers to go through all their applications. So this was completely, they were unprepared for this. So you've noticed with the UCs and many of the schools,
and all that for the UCs is a public institution. That's going to cost them more money to do so, and it might draw down from academics and other factors. So yeah, it's all related.
Other things too, just the IB A-level exams. So we don't know. I don't have the crystal ball this year about the IB exams and whether year 13 students are going to be able to take the exams. We anticipate what the information that we have from the IB is that one of the things that they're piloting is this idea is they've asked us as at NIST if we're able to host the exams this year. So they've done a preliminary survey to schools and say, due to, every school around the world is affected differently by the coronavirus and its impact. So they've asked schools around the world, they said, if we're able to host, are we able to do that? So we've told them yes, that thus far in May, we anticipate that we'll be able to host the exams. So it's sort of a wait and see thing with the IB and whether they're going to allow some schools for students to take the actual exams and others are just going to simply say we can't, due to the schools in the US and UK with COVID in May. I don't anticipate anything. It's going to be more difficult for those schools to run the exams. So it's still a wait and see approach, but we're hopeful that NIST will be able to offer the IB exams this year for the year 13 students. And that last point.
When you say host, as host only for your own students, right? No outside parties.
Yeah, it wouldn't be outside. It would just be for NIST students. So we've been communicating that information frequently with the IB, and we're hopeful that we can get our year 13s get their final exams done here. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy. I've sort of talked for quite a bit here. I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy. He's going to talk about the really fascinating history of the SAT, and then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of the NIST program, the NIST Testtakers program for February break.
The sordid tale of the SAT. I'm going to get through this pretty quick. If any of you want more details on this, I'd encourage you to have a look on my website, just testtakers-sg.com. There are a couple longer webinars that I've done both with James and other people where I get into the nuts and bolts a bit more. But basically, SAT started in the 1920s and 30s. The top schools in America in the Northeast needed a test to make it look like they're meritocratic. And weren't just schools for rich kids. So they adopted a test that was used by the US Army. When you went in the Army, you took a test. If you did well, you ended up as someone's valet or driver. If you didn't do well, you were a Marine in the front of the boat that went over to Omaha Beach. And then it grew and grew after the war. It's now taken by over 2 million students per year. It's the one standardized yardstick that they can use because in America, we don't have IB, we don't have A levels, we don't have a standardized curriculum across all of America. So an A average at one school does not equate to an A average at another school. So the SAT was always the kind of the benchmark of looking at at comparable students across different high school systems. Now, it's an important factor in university admissions. Grades were always the most important factor, okay? And particularly IB, American schools know the IB, they love the IB, and that's going to be the most important number that they look at first. And then SATs were always a distant second. Now, in the age of COVID, SAT scores are basically going to validate your IB results. If you do well, great. If you don't do well, no biggie. Upcoming test dates listed there. It's 5 times a year. Those of you up at NIST, you guys are lucky. You have a test seat looking for you. I'm turning business away every day from kids who can't get a seat to take the test until August in Singapore. So count yourself very lucky that you can take it and get it out of the way. And again, scores have no set validity. I'm not sure if any of you have national service concerns or going back to Korea or something, but there's no expiry to SAT dates. They're with you for life. Okay, go ahead, James. Format, multiple choice, mainly 3.5 hours long. It's a little shorter now. They made a couple changes recently. Scored on a range of 400 to 1600. If you're scoring over 1500, you're in good shape. If you're scoring less than 800, you shouldn't be touching it with a barge pole because you'd be looking at schools that aren't really competitive or are test blind, very much so. 4 sections, reading, a long 65 minutes of reading boring articles, answering questions about them. Writing and language, which is English grammar and the way sentences flow to the next, basically writing skills. Then you've got straight up math, problem solving, solve for X, solve for Y, word problems. Again, like I mentioned earlier, these are things that you presumably are learning how to do in school already in terms of reading, writing, and mathematics. So there's nothing new on the SAT, and this gets into when you should test. You shouldn't test too early, you shouldn't test too late, but the more you're in school, your SAT scores will naturally float up over time. If you're in the Army or something, it's different, but if you're engaging with regular academic work and reading 5 or 10 hours a week, your SAT scores will get better over time. So taking the test too early is a common mistake, sadly, in Asia. Okay, yep. Format, again, vocab is still a thing, not as important. Grammar, your kid's grammar is terrible. I'll tell you right now. They don't know the difference between who and whom, forget it. So we spend in our program, it's probably about 40% grammar. It's a little bit boring, but that's where the points are. Math is not hard math, but I find with IB math, the order that they cover things isn't the same as the standard American common curriculum. So I've had IB students at UWC who are like, oh, I haven't covered that yet. Well, what's that concept? And they're well into IB1. So there might be some things in math on the SAT that your kid hasn't covered yet, depending which IB stream they're in. And then they just want to sort of fill in the blanks with Khan Academy just to see what's there. One of the 4th reading passages is always going to be a founding document, which is normally going to be about American history, America. Oftentimes it's from the American Civil War period, Civil Rights Movement, or the Revolutionary War. If you know the context of those periods of history, it makes your life a little bit easier. The format of the SAT is now suspiciously like the ACT, but unlike the ACT, it's actually available. Okay, next one, James. Humming along here. SAT scores. Okay, here's just a median SAT scores. Universities don't like to give you the median score because that makes it look like that's their minimum or something. They like to give you the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile. So I basically just took those numbers and went to the middle, and that's the way math works. Left-hand side, you get some perfectly great universities out there. Middle column, great state schools. UMass Amherst, I grew up near there. It's wonderful. These are schools that are awesome at everything pretty much. And then on the right hand, those are the rock stars. Those are the schools that even if you get a 1580 and get a 44 IB, are you going to get into Michigan? I don't know. Did daddy go there? What else? What else do you got? What else do you got? And, you know, kids who obsess too much about scores or IB results were probably better served doing sports or engaging in other more worthy activities that will make a difference between you and all the other bright kids in Asia who score really, really well on these tests. I have a kid years ago, got a perfect IB, perfect SATs, perfect subject test, rejected Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Columbia, Stanford. And he went to University of Chicago, not too shabby. He studied economics, now he's a hedge fund manager. So look outside certainly aspire to greatness, but also be realistic and listen to James when he tells you straight up what schools are within the pale. We talked earlier about test optional. Test optional means test optional. It means if you can take it, great. And if you score well, then submit. If not, don't. So if your median SAT score at, say, it's a school like, we talked about Tufts earlier, it's probably like 1450 or so at Tufts. So if you score 1510, submit your scores. You make it looks good. If you score 1380, maybe not. And that's a decision you have to make with your counselor based on that. It's almost like what you put on a dating profile. You only want to put the things that impress people. You don't want to put things on your resume that make you look like you're not as good as you possibly could be. And that's all case by case. Now, only 70% of Americans are able to take the test. And of course, universities can't require a test that kids can't take unless you're in Florida. And then they do, but that's a whole different thing. And what they're going to do with their equations and algorithms, they're just going to weight more heavily your IB results to make up for these and take a look at other factors a little bit more carefully. Talk to your university advisor. Again, everything out there in the websites and Twitter feeds and stuff is all mainly directed to class of 2021 kids. And universities are still, what's going on here? They're building their class, and only probably in May, June will really their policies for 2022 be anywhere near set. Would you agree with that, James?
Yeah, it's still, this is change. Yeah, the updates and the requirements are changing um, on a daily basis. But yeah, I just think with the access issue, right, that it's not going to be. I would agree that it's going to be test optional up to them. But as
Yeah,
we
yeah,
said, right?
it can't not be.
Yeah, but I think it's just with these top tier schools, as I said, if that's the consideration, then having an SAT score, or counterbalancing an SAT score with, say, your IB results are a 30 or 31, and you've got impressive SAT scores of, say, like 1500, or that's going to show it. It's going to help you balance the academic.
Yeah, but let's just be honest. A kid with a 30-31 is not going to stand a chance at any super competitive American school.
True. Yeah. So, but then again, when you're looking at, the top tier schools, as I said before, with the Ivies and stuff, they're still, if they're not going to be looking at an SAT score, they're going to want, I think one of the best quotes that I ever heard from a college admissions person describing who gets into these universities is like, these kids basically walk on water. Like that's literally what they're looking for. They're looking for something so unique that they've never seen before. They're looking for a kid who's invented something that is a burgeoning discovery, or they've done something that's changed the culture of their high school, or they've done something that they've inspired their peers to do something that has never been done before. They don't know what they're looking for. They just they see it on the application, and then they know who it is they want.
Without getting into the weeds too much, I was talking to a friend in the UK yesterday, broadly about admissions and stuff. And the top schools in America are quite small in terms of undergrad population. They only accept, they only have 1,000 kids or so per year. University of Toronto and University of British Columbia have more undergraduate students than I think the top 20 private schools in America combined, or something crazy like that. So these schools are so small that you can only accept 6 or 7 kids a year from Southeast Asia. That's just the way it is.
Let me give you a breakdown. Of UPenn, right? It's 2,000 undergrads total. That's for first year. It's a total, undergraduate class of under 10,000 for the whole university. They can only admit 2,000 students to UPenn. 1,800 have to have U.S. passports. That's a must. You're looking at 200 kids from around the world who are.
Every parent want their son to go to Wharton. So there you go. Yeah, and my alma mater, Columbia, I think, is the smallest undergrad Ivy that only has about 13 or 1,400 students per year. That includes engineering.
Yeah,
and that's tiny in the scale of things. When you look at, a big UCLA is what, 10,000, 15,000 or something.
Yeah, something like that.
But anyway, so talk to your university advisor. Everything's going to be okay. We'll get through this together. Okay, let's go on the next slide, James. Changes. Okay, recent changes. Subject test, done. Essay, done. Not a thing, canceled. It was a commercial decision. College Board was losing money on this for years. And if you lose money on a product, you stop selling it. So we predicted this is going to happen. It's a good thing. It makes your life a little bit easier. So any requirements you see on any websites about subject tests, just ignore them. The only exception might be some schools in Asia might still require them, because particularly schools in Singapore, it takes them about 2 years to make a change. University of California now legally is not able to look at SAT scores for a couple years. I could talk for 2 hours about that. It's a legal political move rather than academic, and there's lots of ink that's been spilled on that. Test registration, register early, register often. ACT, just talk just very briefly about it, is the competitor to SAT, Coke, Pepsi, rugby league, rugby union, American League, National League. Same thing, more or less, just slightly different format. ACT pretty much gave up on international, and they canceled the test internationally in December and April. And they're allegedly going to be opening back up in June. James, you're technically a test center for ACT.
We are. The last test we had at NIST was in November, so there's been no further updates from the ACT in that regard. So they really have stopped. They've been focusing on
engaging internationally. Yeah, I mean they let go all their internationally facing staff, both in their home office and also abroad. So I think they're kind of circling the wagons right now because they don't have any other products other than the ACT to see them through. But again, I've written on that on my website as well. You can have a look there. So yeah, but don't worry about the ACT for now. It's just not really it's probably not gonna be able to take it. So just dance with a girl that you brought to the dance. It's what we have. Okay, when to test? Second half of IB1, perfect. That way you have opportunity to take it again if necessary without getting overly mental. I have kids in Singapore who took, against my advice, took the test in August of their IB1 year, then they take it again in October, then they take it again in December, and you end up in this Sisyphean cycle of Twilight Zone test prep. I'm just doing again and again and again. And you know what? They keep scoring the same thing again and again and again. So we get them from there to there, and they keep doing the same thing again. So doing preparation too early is a waste of time and money. I've written extensively about this on the blog. Preparing for the test over your February break and then taking the test in March, rock solid. Ideally, you get your score back. Okay, I'm good. And you're done with it. But if you need to take it again, don't take it again in May. That's too soon. Worry about your IB exams and all that. If you need to take it again, you've got August. August is sitting there as a test date. It's a new one. It's useful. So if you're going to take it again. After you get results back, you know where you stand, and then register to take it again in August. A lot of kids register to take it in March and May. That's setting yourself up to fail because you already go walking in saying, well, I've got a backup. I might as well do that. It's like walking to a hard tee shot with a mulligan in your pocket. You know you're not going to try very hard, right? So you want to make sure that you register, take it, get a good result. Again, like I talked about earlier, these tests cover what you learned in school already. A lot of the math and stuff you might haven't seen yet. Flip through an SAT. I'm sure NIST has got a couple of those big books to see if a couple of math concepts you haven't seen yet. Khan Academy is your friend. It's wonderful. Yeah, and most schools are going to accept. If they're accepting SATs at all, they're going to do score choice. So they're going to accept the highest combination if you have taken the test multiple times. But that's getting into the weeds a little bit. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, Jeremy. That the fact that the essay, that they've gotten rid of that section. One of the things when you sent your scores, you would have to send if you did test option or you did the score choice, sometimes you would send the essay score in, and that could bring down the overall test, the test choice score. So I'm really happy to see that that the essay component is not there anymore. Another thing too, a really good advice here about taking it and using the summer to kind of reflect and build on your skills. If you plan to take as a year 12 student, if you plan to take the SATs in August, not taking it too soon after the fact. We offer it in August, and a new updated one this year was September. So there was it was really strange. We had an August this year. We had a September 26th, and then so there was 3 in a row. And
yeah, the September was 1 week before the October, which I think that was a kind of a knee-jerk reaction of College Board just wanting to add another test date so kids in Kansas could take it, and then kind of just international went along with it. But so, I think I'm not sure. Is September listed for this year as well?
September isn't listed, no. So it was a makeup session because they canceled the May exam. So it was more of a makeup. So I don't anticipate that one will be there. And registration hasn't opened yet for the ones in August or October yet. That's forthcoming. I'll let parents and students know when the registration opens for those particular dates.
Please let me know as well, because I have about 15 parents in Singapore who are hitting refresh on the College Board website every day. Okay. So everyone's a little different. Talk to your guidance counselor. SATs aren't going to get you in, but they're going to help if you score well. That's the basic gist. How to prep early, work hard in school. Read. If you read, there's always a kid who scores really well in the first test. And I say, oh, do you read a lot? They say, oh yeah, I read books. And people look at it like, you read books? What's that? So kids who read actively do well in the test. People who are very good at math do well in the test. And ultimately, when you get to college, what are you going to be asked to do? Read a lot and presumably do math. So it's testing skills that you will need to display in academics. And also when you get to be an adult, which I like to think of myself as doing, what do I do a lot of? Well, I read a lot and I do a lot of accounting, which is kind of math, I guess. So it's testing your life skills for later on. And one thing I'm seeing every year is an erosion of kids' reading skills because of TikTok, because of this, because of that. Sit your kid down and just compel them to read a magazine or something that interests them. They're not going to read Scientific American. If they're into sports, get Tennis Monthly or something. Just something that they can read articles and then summarize the articles. Key life skill the SAT teaches that you need to develop later on as well. Ken Burns' history documentaries are great because they cover American history those periods, but they're also 16, 17 hours long. So it's a bit of an investment. The English grammar course on Khan is wonderful. Not SAT grammar, just English grammar on Khan. Khan is free. Khan is great. Use Khan. No one does. And again, doing a stack of practice papers when you're in 9th and 10th grade, you're just going to get frustrated. You're just going to get frustrated. It's like playing a really hard golf course before you learn how to play. You're going to give up because it's just going to seem really, really hard. And a good way to prepare for an IB, for instance, is to do a stack of past papers. That works for the SAT, but only to a limited extent. What happens is you reinforce bad habits, and then it makes learning new ways of doing things a little bit harder later on. And the new ways of doing things is what we focus on in our programs. Okay. How to prep later? Yeah, it's first thing you do in our first day of our class, we take a practice test. If you score 1480 or 1520, you're good. You go and read a couple books, you're gonna be fine. Practice test 2 to 3 months in advance, you got plenty of time. More is not better on SAT prep. You don't need to be doing SAT prep for 6 months. That's crazy town. A lot of people will give you a diagnostic test when you walk in their office and it looks like you scored really badly. And they're just scoring it harshly. So just be a little bit suspect of any diagnostic test by any other providers. There are 10 practice tests available on the College Board website and on Khan Academy. They're available for free. Programs not leading to test dates aren't great. And just because you're a smart kid who scores really well in the SAT, it doesn't mean you know anything about teaching. So conveying the knowledge to that is something that's hard to do in this little niche world that we're in. And also most SAT companies in Southeast Asia, not us, do upselling of advising packages of helping you get into Stanford and USC. That's not something we do. You have some of the world's best support at your school. Avail yourself of that support. James isn't always going to tell you what you want to hear, but he's going to tell you what you need to hear. Other people who are in it for the money will tell you what they want to hear, and they don't deliver. There's very few people I've met in my 25 years in Asia doing this that are reputable who claim to be doing advising. This is what I call the Craig curve. My last name is Craig. I see this all the time. Kids prepare. They get up to their optimal score, then they keep preparing. They get sick and tired of the test, and then their score might actually marginally go down. And all that time would be better spent making the debate squad, playing tennis, doing volunteer work, getting a job at McDonald's, and just any other things they could be working on instead of getting an extra 20 or 30 points on the SAT. 1 or 2 points on the IB makes a big difference. 20 or 30 points on the SAT means nothing. It's only really appreciable in 50, 100 points quantities. SAT scores are really lumpy because I say this all the time. IB represents 2 years of hard graft, hard work, very structured, boom, great program. SAT is a 3-hour test you take on a Saturday morning. So it's a much more woolly metric, and universities are well aware of that. And no universities in America have a minimum SAT score. Now, that gets a little bit trickier if you're looking at schools in the UK, but if you're doing IB, you don't need to worry about that. So it's only American system schools applying in the UK. So don't waste time on SAT prep. Yeah. Again, this little update, AP exams, well, anyone's guess. We don't know what's going on there, but you're not taking those anyway. Don't worry about them. IB exams, James already spoken to that. Yeah, I hope they're in person. To doing the predictive stuff, you're never going to make everyone happy. And parents, no matter what happened, they're going to lawyer up, just based on this. Also, IB, particularly UK schools, they have so strict, you get into this faculty with this mark, that the difference between a 5 and a 6 can really make a profound difference of where a kid goes. In America, not as profound, just 1 point. Again, A-levels canceled in the UK. We'll see what happens. Again, we're just feeling our way here, so we'll see what happens moving forward.
Okay, let's see. What do we got here? Sorry about that. Let's move on to the next. One sec here, Jeremy. I'm just going to finish off the rest of our presentation. Yeah, parents, just a reminder while I'm getting this set up, if you have any questions too, we're gonna take those up at the end of today's presentations. We've got a couple more slides to go, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you have. So let me just share this with you all now. Okay, here we go. All right. So this is just some advice. I think the last couple, Jeremy, some advice for each class level grades. So this is the parents now, year 12 parents of the class of 2022. So this is for the parent group and students right here. So this is just to recap, SAT will be optional, as we said, probably, at least until 2023 that it's going to be optional. So your IB scores, as Jeremy mentioned, are going to be your most important factor from academically and getting into the really good schools. Other things too, take grades, as we said, right? The grades are ultimately the focus for you. Some other things too, I really liked the point of Jeremy when he mentioned the importance of using the opportunities to do things that are interesting to you, to doing things. If you're the kind of parent or kind of student that really wants to get your son and daughter engaged, try to have them focus on something that they enjoy doing and sort of hyper focusing or micro focusing on that. Reading, getting magazines or books related to that subject area. As when you're looking at college admissions for the top tier schools, it is a bit of a sales mark. You are selling yourself and a product, and whatever you can do to read more about that particular subject, be an expert to know many different things, but also have your niche kind of set out for you that you can talk about in your college essay and your application. So that's something for year 12 parents and students to kind of think about right now is what is it about me that stands out? What's different about me from the rest of the applicants maybe that are applying to these top tier institutions? Maybe I'm really into one thing I really love to do is designing apps or 8-bit video games on websites, and I make my own games or something. Maybe I like developing apps for helping people in the community. What is it that you do that you like to do intrinsically that you could kind of parlay into a really strong college essay or idea moving forward? Because for this class, particularly the year 12s, we're going to be hyper focusing with you students and parents on prepping your essays starting in the last part from April to June, trying to find those areas that make you stand out and articulating those to universities and college. So grades are important, but also focus on what your unique set of skills are and interests, and taking those to the next level when you're looking at applications. Class of 2023, maybe some parents are watching this from year 11 and year 10. Other things to find some things you're passionate about. So I'm gonna add that to the class of this is sort of the tidbits of advice that I put into the class of 2022. Find things that you are passionate about. You can't fake it. No matter if you're interested in something, it's going to find you anyway at university. Your parents might say, oh, you should go into medicine and do this. Maybe you don't really like it, but you're going to find out at university what it is, what your calling is. But maybe you can start nurturing those passions right now. Maybe you can start telling your parents and talking to them about what you're truly interested in, and maybe finding a way to craft that in a college essay to communicate with colleges and universities. And yeah, reading. Okay, it's as I said, it's something that is with online social media, it's TikTok and these kind of things. Just sustained reading over time, being able to read from a challenging text, not just your simple books, but take a look at the university websites take a look at Columbia University, they publish recommended readings for undergraduate students. Those could be your list of books that you could start to read over summer or start to read now. These are some things that you can show universities and demonstrate them that you're a well-rounded student and have a strong base. Yeah, Jeremy, you want to jump in here?
Just on reading, one thing I also recommend everyone does is find a list of most commonly read books by American high school students and just start working through that list. Let's be honest, you're not going to read James Joyce when you're 15 years old, but anyone who hasn't read 1984, Brave New World, and Fahrenheit 451 hasn't read anything, in my view. And if you go into a elite school and you haven't read those certain books that everyone around you has read, you're just going to feel a little bit dumb. And they aren't hard books to read, but you just have to make sure you knock off the boxes to get that core, not even a canon of Western Lit, just like the basic stuff that people have been reading for 100 years at American and British high schools. You want to make sure you read that. So not the complete Shakespeare, but you need to know Romeo and Juliet, let's be honest, right? So certain things like that. And maybe one thing I do, even in my reading, I alternate fun books, trashy science fiction stuff, with serious books. And I read a serious book, then I read a fun book, and I alternate back and forth. So right now I'm reading an 800-page book on the history of the Crusades. And after that, I'm going to read the most recent episode of The Expanse. So I just alternate back and forth. I reward myself. But again, anyone who can read a lot when you're in high school, you're just well served later on. Put your phone away when you read. Put it in the other room. Lock yourself in a closet or something, and to just develop that habit.
Yeah, and if you're that student that's focused already, you know exactly what your major is going to be at university. You want to be looking for parents and for students. One thing you want to be looking at is the websites of these universities and finding out what professors are teaching these classes at university. You want to kind of get the jump on the game. And you want to, not when you're writing your college essays to be doing the research. This research is going to be starting with you now to find out who's teaching in the PhD level. What books have they published? Maybe I'd read one. Maybe I want to start reading one of those books to find out if this is, a micro area that I really want to get into and further research. It's just going to be so impressive. Yeah.
And on the flip side, if you know you're in a particular field, I'm really into, kids come to me, I really want to study AI and quantum engineering. I'm like, So I say, find books on AI and quantum engineering that you like, look on the back of the book, find out who wrote it, and find out where that person either went to school or is currently teaching. And that's a good proxy for schools that would have strong programs in those niche areas. Because you can't even do a search online and say, I want the best whatever programs in America. Rankings are flawed. Rankings by undergraduate programs are garbage. But if you can find out the leading names in that field, find out where they're at in terms of teaching and where they went to school, that's a good proxy. That said, if you go to Columbia or University of Chicago, economics is going to be really strong there, but you're not going to get in the same room as the guys, mostly men, who've won PhDs in that field. But it's a good proxy for the quality of that specific program at that specific school.
Yeah, no, great advice.
Yeah.
The other thing too, if you're a year 10 parent or student listening to this advice, don't worry. It's too soon to be worried about college applications, but what you should start to do, the whole theme of this year for year 10s is getting to know more about who you are, what you like, what you enjoy, pursue those passions. And then hopefully by the end of this year, you might be able to be the leader in a club, maybe starting in year 11. So you can kind of develop those leadership skills, teach other students and kind of be the person who is, the one to lead other students and get something started at the school. Being the initiator is critical when it comes to those kind of clubs. If there's something that you like that doesn't exist at the school, college admissions loves hearing the stories of those people who start clubs. Like if I think of my students who've been admitted to Ivy League schools, there's always the story of the student who started this, or it didn't exist before, but now it existed because of the students. It continues to this day. So, what is it? Maybe something that you like, that you enjoy, that intrinsically, how could you take it further, or how could you share it with other people? It's just a great thing to have on your CV. Lastly, so Jeremy, do you want to talk about the program, and we'll share.
Again, all we do really is SAT prep. We don't do admissions advising, even though obviously we know about it. We kick that back to the school. They're better equipped than us to deal with that. We've been in Singapore doing this since 2001, if you believe it. Nothing would make us happier than spending a week in Bangkok and eating glorious food and teaching SAT prep in person every day. Particularly, I'm going on almost a year now, having been stuck in Singapore, like all of us. So this program, maybe go on the next page now, James, I think it's the schedule, is remote. It's Zoom. We've gotten good at it. We've got the iPads, we've got the stylus, we've got that. We keep class size very small, to make sure we can look everyone in the eye. Everyone's got to turn their camera on. Everyone's got to have their mic on when we go through this. We cover everything very quickly, and then we give you resources to work on it after that. It's basically an analogy I always use. If you just want to learn how to play tennis, hitting the ball against a wall, you're going to get better. But if you have a good pro teaching you how to do things right from the start, you're going to be a much better player much quicker than just hitting the ball against a wall. And we bring our techniques and strategies to apply the knowledge that you've already learned to this silly multiple choice test. So you see it pretty much meets every day over your break. And then we use a couple weekends afterwards to both take diagnostic tests that we do proctor live. And then we go over the diagnostic tests. We have a couple supplemental office hours you see there in March 3rd and 10th to do individual stuff or just work in areas you want to work on. And then again, ideally you take the test in March, you're done with it, and then you're good. And then in terms of materials, all the materials are going to be supplied to you. We're still working out how to best get it to you. It's a total course fee, $750 US. That's all inclusive. That covers everything. No additional fees on top of that. And if you pay before February 1st, so soon, you're going to get a 10% early booking discount. And we'll do our best to get you the Study Buddy flashcard box as soon as possible. That's my broad pitch.
Yeah, no, and as I said, Jeremy's already, if you go to the website on Testtakers, you can see all the student reviews from around the world. I've got many attestations from parents, and if you want more info or evidence that our students have improved in their scores and felt more confident taking it. I think the timing is brilliant for year 12s. You guys have for the students, they've just finished their exams. So right now, this is coming up in 3 weeks. It's a great way to keep their brain active during break, right? Instead of you can still do your family holiday. The schedule is such that, especially being online, it takes place, it looks like, mostly in the mornings until the afternoon.
All mornings, yeah.
All mornings. So they got the rest of the day to kind of practice and review, and it's intensive over that time. It keeps their brains active, and also having that extra final check-in session on the 3rd and 10th before the day of the test, like having that individualized sort of support is just it's such a confidence is everything. When you're taking this test, if you have the confidence of somebody in your corner that Jeremy and the team can answer any questions you have or say you're going to do great and motivate you along the way. I mean, the whole SAT test is a test in confidence. And if you got somebody in your corner, you're just going to be that much better, and you're going to believe that you're going to do. It's one of those things, and you've got the expertise of over somebody who's been doing this for over 20 years.
Yeah, I'm 93. I started, so I'm going on 30.
Wow.
God.
Yeah.
Okay. I got 10 more years in me. 10 more years in me, maybe. Okay.
All right. Well, let's. I think that's it. We'll share the information. I'll make sure to get the PowerPoint slide out to you parents today. All the registration info. I'm just going to see. I'm going to stop sharing here. I think we finished I don't know. We'll wrap it up here. The thing is, the adaptability of things and the fluidity of things. That the thing is, we don't know what the future holds in regards to college admissions. We've seen many changes this year. But one of the things that I think that is important is keeping that motivation and that drive going, and keeping the academic focus, and certainly as part of that too. I think the SATs it's such an important for U.S. universities. It's such an important academic component, and I don't think, although schools will be test optional, I think those students that have that are able to display that result are certainly going to get the benefit. And the look from the universities maybe that other students aren't, unless there's some like I said, that walk on water example, or that something that's so remarkable that the colleges can't look away from that kind of student. It certainly does give an advantage, but the advice there too, talk to me, talk to whoever your son or daughter's university counselor is in regards to the latest updates. We'll continue to support you along the way with this. We've got lots of events coming up. Like each month, we have the coffee mornings where we share university updates from around the world. But yeah, there is a lot of inaccurate news out there about universities, and just talk to the sources, talk to us to make sure that you're getting the right information. Last thing, I'm going to just stop sharing the screen here, and let's see what questions parents have here in the chat box for us. I've only got one question. Okay, great. Oh, Minnie just said, okay, perfect. Are there any other questions from parents or anything? I don't see anything in the chat box here. Jeremy, anything?
I don't see anything either, but obviously I'm available. Best way to get me is via email. Run around a lot. And obviously you all know how to contact James with any specific questions that you have. But just to echo his message, there's plenty of time for us to figure things out. Don't get too worried now, because the worst thing you can do is worry about the wrong things. And just try to take almost like a Taoist approach, just kind of let things come and then react to them rather than try to be proactive, which I know a lot of parents have a hard time not being proactive, but that's the advice I've been giving to many over the last 6 months.
Okay. So parents, year 12 parents, thanks so much for joining us today. For students watching this, we've recorded this so you can watch it on your own, but we want to thank Jeremy for joining us today with Testtakers. We got a great program lined up for NIST students for February. It's the perfect time, really, in your schedule as a year 12 student, and for parents to get prepared for this, for the March SATs. If you have any questions about registration or for the SATs or for the Test Takers program, please contact myself. For the program itself, you can either contact myself or Jeremy. But as I mentioned, as Jeremy mentioned, there is if you're interested in this, there is a 10% discount if you let us know before next Monday. So with that, I'm just going to wrap it up. And
James, real quick, there's one Q&A that just came in about a kid who's as a test center in Chonburi. Can they request a change to Bangkok? I would say that would be something. Contact James on that directly. That's something you could probably do.
Absolutely, yeah. I help with that. We have a representative here in the College Board who helps to move students from different test centers if they've been misallocated. So happy to help with that.
Okay, great. All
right. Well, thank you so much, parents, and thank you, Jeremy. And look forward to meeting you. Most of you are going to be there for our big meeting on February 10th, and look forward to catching up soon, Jeremy. Thank you.
Okay, all the best.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.